Hey.
Hey.
Asking for a friend.
Hey. Asking for a friend.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm only asking for a friend.
I'm just asking for a friend.
I'm asking for a friend.
I'm only asking for a friend.
Hey, I'm asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend. You guys may be seated. All right, there we go. We're ready to go. Asking for a friend. I told Elijah I wish I had those skills to shoot a promo and then make a swish. So we're getting into this series and the idea of asking for a friend. So just by show of hands, before we start, how many people have used that phrase before? Like, just be honest, put your hands up. You use the phrase like, hey, I'm just asking for a friend. Okay, I see a couple honest people in here. So whether your tone of voice is like, hey, I'm just asking for a friend and there's a real friend, or whether your tone of voice is like, hey, I'm asking for a friend, I'm really asking for a friend and there's no real friend and you're just asking for yourself. So wherever you're at, this series is the opportunity to answer everything that you guys sent in. So Norris talked about it. There's over 600 questions from all of you guys that sent in, and we're gonna take the most popular topics from the questions and we're gonna just take time and answer those questions. So that's what this is today, in a lot of different ways. And so the one I'm gonna tackle today is relationships. Relationships, and not just relationships in a big picture, but romantic relationships, because that's a little broad if you say relationships. So romantic relationships, there were lots of questions, as there always are, I feel like, from your group, this age group, on romantic relationships, but I'll even get specific. So the main questions that came in kind of centered around this. How do we have good relationships in high school in 2021? And I think that's super complex, because it's complex already, but then you also add in it a pandemic and you add in it all the different things that we're dealing with. But I even give you some sub-themes. So how do we have relationships in high school in 2021, ready, in a way that honors God, in a way that's healthy and not toxic, in a way that takes into account all the things, Mr. Mayo, that we're actually dealing with, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's the technology that's, so much different from, if you guys talk to your parents, obviously so much different. So how do we do relationships? And I will say this, we're not telling you by tackling this, I wanna say this, we're answering your question. So don't leave here today thinking man, I gotta get in a relationship, because Mr. Mayo just talked about it for 40 minutes, and so we gotta get in a relationship. We're not saying that. If you ask me, I would emphasize, even this group, and I'll say it like this, because I told 9th and 10th grade on Tuesday, I would not emphasize relationships at all. I would talk about how it's so much better and you learn so much more at this stage for you guys, even Gen Z, which you are, to be in groups, to be in mixed groups, how you learn so much more from hanging out, being a good friend to if you're a guy, being a good friend to guys, and if you're a guy, being a good friend to girls, and vice versa, how you learn so much just being able to do that. But I will say this, so let me see everyone's eyes real quick. If you got a phone, I want you to put it away. I want you with me today. Listen. For you guys, you're closer. Some of you are about to be out of here in 3 months, whether you walk across the stage or, I don't know, we're out in the field and you do drive-by diploma. I don't know, we'll decide, we'll figure something out. If you graduate, we'll give you a diploma somehow. But, whatever we do, you guys are about to be out of here, and you may say, well, Mr. Mayo, I'm in this now, we're tackling this now. So the advice I gave on Tuesday is not the exact same advice I give to you guys today, because you're a lot closer. Even if you're a junior in here, you're a lot closer. And you might be saying, hey, I'm in this, or I was in this for a long time. One of the questions, I'll just go right to a question, was this: what's the best age to start dating? Some of you are like, hey, I'm past that one, or I'm already dating, so that one doesn't apply to me. And some of you guys might be like, hey, I'm wondering that. I always say it's best determined by you, obviously, but also your parents and Jesus. Okay? I would make sure your parents are in the conversation. I don't know what your home life looks like, but I would make sure that's a conversation that happens. You will be so happy on the other side that you brought them into that conversation early. There's no magical age to start. It takes into a lot of account maturity. And if you ask people who started early, they'll say, man, I wish I was probably a little more mature before I started. So I think that's a big deal. Again, if I were to tell you anything, I would emphasize groups. I would get to know people. I would get to know people in friend groups, because you see a lot and you don't let culture rush you, because culture can rush you. And I know there's a guy out there right now, one of y'all are sitting there, or there's a girl out there right now, and it's like, hey, you know what, Mr. Mayo, like if I don't date right now in high school, I'm not gonna find anyone. And if I don't find anyone in high school, I'm not gonna find anyone in college. And if I don't find anyone in college, then I'm never gonna get married, and I'm gonna end up like the lady in my development who lives by herself with 16 cats or something, okay? We don't want you to be the cat lady. I don't know if your aunt has a cat or a lot of cats, I'm sorry. But what we're saying is this: don't let culture rush you, and you can learn a lot from groups. And I want to talk about groups for a second. We're getting to your questions, but I want to talk about this. So I think this, and as I do this, and Sean, if you're listening, I know you are, you can show the point first before the pictures. But as I do this, I want to show you guys a lot of pictures of great friend groups that I know at CCA who actually, after they left CCA or during, got to know each other in groups, and some of those people got engaged, and some of those people are getting married or are married. So there's a lot to be said for groups, but I'll just say this first. So groups create natural boundaries, okay? Groups create natural boundaries, natural accountability, and you get to see people in a lot of different situations, okay? And so Sean, as you go through, you can show those pictures now. And I want you guys to see some of those pictures, because you might say, hey, I'm in a great friend group at CCA, and I like my friend group, and there's a lot that's come from that. And I would say keep doing that, because that shows you a lot. Natural accountability, again, natural boundaries, and you see people in a lot of different situations. And I would even say this: how many people know that person? So you got a friend group, okay? This is our crew. We hang together as much as you can, except for when people are in quarantine. So if you're watching online, we love you. We know you can't be here. Some of you want to, but if you think about this, so you're in a friend group, and then all of a sudden, someone in that friend group starts to date someone, right? And then, not only do they start to date someone, but all of a sudden, you never see that person again. It's like they got taken away by aliens, sucked off the face of the earth. Anyone have that happen before? Like you're in a friend group, and all of a sudden, look at all the hands. Everyone just look around for a second, hey? You don't want to be that person. Hey, don't point to anyone. Some people be like, yeah, that guy right there. I only see him in chapel now. You don't want to be that person, but you also, that doesn't feel good. It's like, man, you know what happened? You guys seen Mike? Nope, I haven't seen Mike. He used to hang out with us. Now he just hangs out with this one girl. Or, I don't even know if Mia comes to CCA anymore. We never see her. Does she withdraw? No, she's always just hanging out exclusively. And that's not the most healthy thing as you think about relationships and as you're moving forward. So I would say this: don't let culture rush you. And if you don't know it, culture rushes you a lot. I think you guys today, I think we're always, everyone, but I think you're getting rushed by culture a lot. And culture will rush you more than you want, okay? It will rush you to do more than you want, to go further than you want, sooner than you want. I'm gonna say that again. Let me see everyone's eyes. Culture will rush you to do more than you want, to go further than you want, sooner than you want. Okay, than you really truly desire to. So I'm gonna read you a statistic that kind of deals with this, because one of the things that they're starting to see is this consumeristic influence on everything in our society, even relationships. This consumerist idea, like, hey, even relationships are a consumer thing. They're just something for me. So Gen Z, 40% of you, Gen Z is you, 40% of you said that you're more rushed to do things that you're not necessarily comfortable with, just based on what you're seeing day in and day out. And I think culture plays upon this too. It can make relationships seem really, really transactional, okay? Relationships are just transactional. They're just for me. What can I get out of it, okay? Whether that's pleasure, whether it's something else, like what can I get from that? And I think our consumerist culture can lead to a very transactional view of how we see relationships. So I want to give you an example of that by two questions that you asked. So ready? And I'll say this: these come specifically from juniors and seniors, okay? And then one of them I didn't say the other day on Tuesday, so because 9, 10 probably weren't ready for that conversation, or maybe they were, and unfortunately we didn't do it, but I hope they're not ready. Let me put it like that. Hookup culture, okay? So this is a question from a junior. How can I be in a relationship when everyone else just wants to hook up, okay? Now, whether that means hookup is like your definition of hooking up is getting together, making out, or whether your definition of hooking up is way further on the other end, and, like hookup means like going ultimately, hooking up. That's, wherever you're at, like hookup culture. How can I be in a relationship when everyone just wants to hook up? Here's another question. This was sent by a senior girl, okay? Senior girl, okay? Not necessarily in this room, but in this class. Girl says, hey, I just want to date a guy without them asking me for the wrong type of picture from me. That came from someone here. So think about those two things. I think that specifically speaks to the consumerist transactional view that plays upon it. And you think about how Jesus operated. Jesus operated not in a selfish way. A consumerist transactional view of relationships is like, that's about me. But Jesus operated in a selfless way. So it's totally contrary to the way Jesus operated, and it's this. So again, let me see your eyes. I think this is important. You're not really seeing someone who operates like that, someone who's like, hey, let me text this. Someone who does that is not operating in a way that says, hey, God is my treasure. Not operating in a way that says, hey, this person, I really want to get to know you like you're my treasure. They're not operating in that way. They're just operating in, hey, what can I get out of the moment? And I think you guys are being, and we are being, I should say, we all are being discipled all the time. Whether you know it or not, we're being discipled all the time. Now you may say like, Mr. Mayo, I'm not being discipled. Like I don't have a mentor. I don't have someone that I meet with regularly. But I would say we're constantly being bombarded with messaging day in and day out. And eventually it starts to take effect, even subconsciously. It starts to take effect and it affects the things that we say and what we do and what we decide to do. Hey, people are discipled by their phone constantly, whether it's, or media in general, TV, whatever, you're discipled. Think about all the time and messaging that comes through your phone day in and day out, and it starts to take effect. Someone in here might say like, hey, I don't know what you mean, because like I don't go to the church of Instagram. I don't go to the church of, I should probably say Snapchat and TikTok, because in Gen Z, you guys use those a lot more than Instagram. They're higher on the usage rate. But if you spend enough time in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year, you kind of are being discipled by those things that you constantly go to consume. I'm gonna pull a stat from Mr. Mo's class, and just to talk about this real quick, because Mr. Mo's class kind of surveyed a lot of people, and it said that out of this group right here, so 50% of people are on their phone more than 3 hours a day. 20% of people are on their phone 5 to 6 hours a day. There's a small percentage of you that's 8 hours and up. So think about that. That's why I say that in discipled. So whether it's a transactional view, one other thing Mr. Mo shared, what I loved, and I thought since you guys don't have him anymore in class, you should hear this, talking about a transactional view of relationships, or why should we not, subscribe to things like hookup culture. I said, Mr. Mose, give me your quick version. Hookup culture, why is it dangerous? He said this. He said, vulnerability, everybody with me? Vulnerability minus safety equals pain. Think about that. Vulnerability minus safety equals pain. And I thought that was such a great way to break it down. And so what we're saying here is, by taking some of these questions, and I promise we'll get back to the more relationship-oriented questions in a different way, probably in a second, than you're used to. But it's just this idea. I'm not against phones. I'm not against media. I'm not up here saying that. It's a huge part of what you do. It's a huge part of your presence. We need to acknowledge that, okay? We don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're like, hey, and there's a lot of churches or messages you would get in Christian schools like, stay away from your phone. It's not, well, no, I think there's more helpful apps and more helpful things than others, but that's not part of it. It's not possible, but it is saying, hey, if you know what's happening, you can make a wise decision, and all of you are so close to leaving here and leaving your home that you need to be informed so you can make a wise decision. Even this real quick before I invite my wife up, because we're gonna tell our story a little bit. Even this, I know so many people now who have actually gotten together great godly relationships from online dating. Listen, 15 years ago, someone was like, hey man, I met him online. Everyone was like, whoa, you met that person online? Watch out, they're a serial killer. That's different today. It's not like that. Things are changing. So we're acknowledging the change that happens, but we're saying be mindful of what you're consuming, and be mindful of how it plays in. And as you have these conversations and as you guys interact, let's be mindful of some of these things. And I wanted to tackle some of those questions right up front because I thought they were good ones and I thought they were honest ones. There's more, but to do it, we're gonna bring up my better half for sure. So my wife is here and she's gonna come up, and here's what we thought. Instead of like going question by question by question by question, because some questions you're like, hey, I wanna hear that, and sometimes you're like, I don't really care about that one. I thought we'd just tell our story, and through our story, answer a lot of the questions that you guys sent in. So as my wife comes, can you please give her a hand? I thought I grabbed the microphone, but I'm gonna see if this one works. So we have 3 kids, and let's see if this microphone works. I think it does. Here you go. Thank you for coming. We have 3 kids. They're all here. We just kind of want to tell our journey, our story of like what we went through as we experienced those relationships, what we went through as we experienced dating. And so with that, I'll let you kind of start. Thanks for coming.
All right, so we went on our first date when I was your age. It was the summer between my 11th and 12th grade year that we had our first date. We had known each other for several years, I would say, before that. Like he mentioned, the group date or group setting, getting to know someone in a group setting, that was really our story. We met, I was attending a church, and we were having a transition of pastors. So Steve's best friend's dad was well known in the community. He's an amazing man of God and pastor. And he came to fill in a role at the church that I was at. At that point, I was probably very early high school age, maybe even late middle school. So when his best friend's dad came, Steve also came to the church. He attended the church with their family. And we got to know each other pretty much at a distance at first because there was a little bit of an age gap between us. So we were in different circles, but it allowed me to get familiar with who he is, who he was at the time, to learn his background, to learn his family. You know, I met his mom and saw his friends, and he was friends with my older sister and my older cousin. So it was this really big circle that we both were in, and it really allowed us to kind of see who each other is, learn the background on each other, which for me, that was hugely beneficial because I think as women, when we do eventually go into a relationship, we want to feel comfortable, we want to feel safe, we want to know that it's a trustworthy man, that we can feel secure in that relationship. And so that's what that started for me. That's how that created that in me, to be able to see him, get to know him, and trust him before we ever even really became friends, before we were in the same circle. I know nowadays it's not uncommon. Like he was saying, I feel like our generation is more of the online dating. For your generation, it's social media. And you might see somebody, you like what they post, you like how they look, and you start messaging, and you've never even been in the same room. Maybe you're not even in the same state. You know, you can do these social media online relationships without ever meeting. I know that, like Mr. Mayo said, that has worked for people. It can work. I would say be very cautious of that because we all know the image that people put out on social media is usually a very small snippet of who they actually are. So for us, getting to know each other first, getting to be in a group setting, eventually our circle really became smaller. We got in the same circle as I got to 11th grade, really, I would say. I went to public high school, so my youth group was my closest group of friends, and we spent a lot of time together that summer. So we did things together. I saw how he interacted with my friends. I got to know his friends. You know, you could see how the person that you're interested in respects people and has a relationship. So we then served together. At the end of that summer, we served together for 2 weeks at a camp for inner city kids. It was 2 weeks. It was overnight camp. It was hard work. The kids were little. They were needy. They came from broken homes. They were literally hanging on us all the time, sleeping in our dorm rooms with us. And it was hard work. And through serving together in that setting, I really got to see how he responded when he's tired, how he reacted to stress, how he loved children that needed to be loved on. And that was huge for me as well. And I think that's such a beautiful opportunity to really get to know somebody, whether it's, you know, an after-school club or activity or a mentorship program, something that you're serving together that you can really see how the other person responds and how the other person loves people.
Yeah, I think that's big. So one of the questions that you asked was just, you know, how do you get to know people? And we just said, like, hey, get to know the person you're interested in beyond their social media life. So like my wife just talked about, you know, there's a lot more to it than that. That's just a snippet, like she just said. And I think there's a lot more that you can do. Now, obviously, it's tough in the situation that we're in. I mean, we're distanced and masked in here, but I think that's something important. And she talked about this, that serving was big. So I didn't just get to see her like on Instagram or on Snapchat or making a TikTok video or something like that. I got to see her really in the hard work of it, and she got to see me, but it was very attractive to me. So me watching her serve was awesome because I was like, man, that is a godly woman. And so again, if there's opportunities to serve, that's a great way to kind of see those things, but just seeing something different, you know. So that goes to the question, what do you look for in a guy or girl? For us that was really attractive. It was that someone who's not only maybe attractive to you, obviously that's important, but also someone who's like, hey, what are they about? Like, what are they truly about? Like, get to know past the surface stuff. Like, what's that person truly about? Are they about the things of God? Are they not about the things of God? Or even just in general, their personality. I think that was really, really big. And so, someone asked this question, how do you know if someone is into the real you? So these all kind of go together. So on our first date, I'll tell you our first date, so you can listen to this. I took her to the most romantic movie of all time. Everybody ready? The most romantic movie of all time, Saving Private Ryan. I like that. I got a couple fists in the air. You're like, oh my gosh, Mr. Mayo, that was the worst choice. Me and Mr. Howard, that's it. That's the worst choice. But I'll tell you this. She went, she was like, yes, absolutely, I'll go. She probably was sitting there like, oh my God. If you know that movie, it's blood, guts, gory, World War II, Normandy Beach. People are like getting limbs blown off, and it's 4 hours long. And there's not a romantic joke in that whole thing. But, she went with me, and it was awesome because even through those kind of things later, I realized like she's really about what I'm about. She was into the real me. Like someone who's gonna find your interest is and interested in you, like your interest and is interested in you is really, really important past, again, like, hey, am I attracted to them, or what kind of car do they drive, or what kind of clothes they wear. Like those are surfacey things, they'll disappear like that. But getting to know someone, the real you goes a lot deeper. And so I encourage you guys, as you do this process, definitely go deeper.
Yeah, so that was the beginning of our leading up to our first date and our first date. And then I feel like for us, this is kind of where things switched for us from doing things right to doing things wrong. We have a long story, so we'll try to keep it short and just give you the short version of it. But there's a phrase or a quote that I have heard that I always love. It kind of switched. A wise man learns from his mistakes. And you think, okay, yeah, a wise man's going to learn from the things he does wrong and not do it again. But I've heard it said, a wise man learns from another man's mistakes. And I think when we can look on and see something that someone else did and say, wow, that did not work out for them, I would not do that. And so we're here to say that from our hearts, to care about you, to love you, to want to protect you, to say, hey, learn from our story, learn what we did wrong, because we did some things that really brought about a lot of heartache, a lot of division, and between families, even division between our families and between us and members of our family. So we just want to share the short version. I grew up in a home where there was never any visible, verbal racism spoken. Nothing was ever expressed. My parents, were loving. We had a great home. That was never something that I would say, oh, my parents were racist. But I knew at the same time, because of our community, because of our upbringing, my family's circles of friends, that I probably would not be expected to bring home somebody outside of my race. So I'm white, I'm from a white community. I grew up in Pennsylvania in a very rural area. So I did not tell my parents. I wasn't the girl who had the open relationship with my parents. We had never talked about dating. I think that was such good advice at the beginning. Have those conversations if they're hard and awkward, but have those conversations about dating. I had not done that. So when he asked me out, I'm thinking my parents probably aren't going to approve of this, so I lied about what I was doing. I said I was going to the movies with friends. I even went so far, I remember my friend Nikki from high school. I said, Nikki's going to pick me up, and we're going out to a movie. So he came to the door earlier than I expected. I was going to be looking out the window so that I could run out like I would if my girlfriend came to pick me up. So he came to the door, knocked on the door, was a gentleman. My mom was respectful and, let us go out to the movie. I think she was kind of processing what was going on. But quickly thereafter, I was told that I was not supposed to date him. They knew that he was a godly man. They knew his family, they knew the circle that he was in, they knew he was a great guy. But just the race thing for them was scary and unknown, so they did not allow that. So we had a question, what role should parents play in the person you date? And it's a tricky one. It's hard because you think, well, my parents shouldn't play a role in the person I'm dating. It's my decision. And when we're young and we're interested in someone, we're in love, we don't generally want to listen to our parents' opinions. My parents, in this case, it was tricky because they were not coming from a place of godly wisdom. It was sinful for them to say that based on his skin color, we're not allowed to date, period, end of story. So It was tricky, but I still, looking back, there's a level of respect and honor that I should have had for my parents that I didn't. And going into it, being deceitful, lying, hiding things, using our friends, both of our friends, we would use them to lie for us, to lie with us, to hide things so that we could have this relationship. And it really led to several years of hard times, really, really hard times. Hard times for us together because we were trying to figure this out. We wanted to be together, but we knew we were lying. We knew we were not honoring those around us, my family and the friendships. So it was really a hard, painful time for us during that.
And I'll just say a really quick word, because raise your hand if you've been on the 10th grade retreat before. So everyone here got a chance to go on 10th grade retreat. So everyone knows this word I'm going to say is honor. You guys are familiar with that. We've talked at length with you guys about honor. And I'll just say this really quickly. Even in the midst of being frustrated about that, being frustrated when I finally found out what it was and that her parents were not good with it, I also was not honoring to her or her parents because I was kind of the one pushing, like, let's continue to try to have this, relationship. And I didn't respect her parents and I wasn't honoring to them. And although I didn't feel like what was happening was right, it still was a wrong response from me, even in the middle of it. And I want to make that clear, because sometimes things can happen to you. And even just, someone who say like, hey, something, whatever nationality you are, like something racist happened to me, like, so I have the right to. And there's a way you can respond though, that's godly, that doesn't go along with what's happening, but also is a godly, respectful response. And even in the midst of that, I would not say I honored them. And I think, if we would go back and do it again, that's something I would do different, so.
Yeah, I think too, and it is hard, like I said, when you're young and you're in love, it's really hard to listen to other people, and not just, our parents speaking into what they want for us or what they think is best for us, but even those around us. You think about your friendships, and if you've ever had a time where you've had to tell a friend, you see something toxic in their relationship, and we want to tell them that, and we just hope that they receive that and respect us still. I think that's important. I think when we're in a relationship, it's very important because they say you're blinded by love, and it's true. There's things that we don't always see in the relationship that can be very damaging, very dangerous. So if you have someone that, you're watching their relationship and there's red flags there, not something like our situation, but maybe something that's different that you see that's just not good for them, it's not healthy, to be able to go to them and speak to them. And for us, in a relationship, to be willing to listen, to just take a moment and say, I am going to listen to what someone's telling me, whether it's a teacher or a small group leader or a parent. It's very important, and to be mature enough to say, I'm going to take that, I'm going to receive it, and I'm going to pray about it. So for us, we continued for a couple years, like I said, of kind of back and forth. There was a lot of breakups. One of the questions, I think, was about how do you prepare your heart
for it not working
out. Yeah. And we went through some of those periods where we thought, okay, this isn't going to work out. So having a circle of friends, I know it was a joke kind of at the beginning, like that person who starts dating and they disappear, but that happens. And if you're that person who disappears, you cut off your friendships, then suddenly when you need them, they might not be there. The relationships are going to look different. So I would really say keep those friendships. Friendships are so important when you're dating. We become, attached to someone else that we're interested in. We want to spend all our time with them. And that can be good, but you have to find the balance. So finding the balance, staying consistent with your friendships, staying loyal to your friendships, so that if for some chance it doesn't work out, you're not destroyed by it. You have a good support system. You have those friends. Learn to rely on God when the times are good, and then when you're going through that, you will be strong enough to get through it. We went through that a lot. We did a lot of back and forth trying to break up because we knew it wasn't right. Eventually, after years, I had graduated high school, and I went on a trip with my family. My uncle was a missionary in Chile, so my family went to spend some time with him, and my dad had a heart-to-heart with him, and he basically told my dad, this is ridiculous. You're destroying your relationship with your daughter over something that does not make any sense. And my dad really understood that. He listened to it, he understood it, and we came home from that trip, and I was given permission to date. And at that point, we were able to bring my parents into our relationship, and they, were able to see that we had a healthy relationship. They were able to see the positives in who he was. But it was a long process. It was a long journey. Into our adult lives, past the time we got married, I had to go back to my parents and say, I never did apologize for this. I just felt God revealed it to me that I had never apologized for the times that I was dishonoring to them. And that was hard, to humble myself as a married, grown woman, to go back to my parents. And I look back and think, man, if we would have done things differently, if I would have had those open conversations with my parents, no matter how hard they were, to say, hey, this is a man that I would like to start a relationship with, and for them to be a part of that with me, I think it could have changed things, which is huge.
And I just say, I also have a great relationship with their parents. Now, it took a lot of work. So even in the midst of this time where we talk about like the racial tension, I know that's not what this is about right now, but it's part of our story. It took a lot of work of both of us, her parents and me, humbling ourselves and trying to like come back and say, okay, I'm gonna forgive you on each side. I'm gonna find common ground, but it can work because it does work right now. We have a great relationship. But again, it takes work and it takes that humbling yourself. And yeah, it's awesome to see on the other side of it, but wasn't easy to go through by any stretch. And I'll just say this, and you can say anything else you want to close. I do want to say this. Our story is just one story. So let me see everyone's eyes one more time. Our story is one story, and I'm hoping that there's something from it this morning that you're like, hey, you know what? That was really good. I'm going to take this away. So I know you have masks on. I want everyone to say one word for me today, not a whole phrase, just one word. Everybody say timeless. One more time, timeless. What we would love to do is hopefully there's something you can take from our story that says, hey, you know what, that's great. No matter if 2 years from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now, like I'm gonna keep that because that was for me. And some of you might say, hey, you know what, a lot of your story didn't apply too much to me, but maybe that's when, for some of you, it's talking to a teacher or your small group leader and say, hey, tell me your story. Like, how did you get together with Mrs. or, how did you get together with Mr. and how did God bring you guys together? And I'll say the most important one. So I'm gonna ask one more question, just by show of hands, ready? How many people have asked their parents about their story? Like how they got together? How many people said like, hey, I've asked my mom and dad, like, hey, how did you guys get together? That's almost the most powerful one for you to pull from and say, okay, this is what I can learn as I start to go through this journey. So pull the truth out of the narrative. This is just one narrative, but you can pull some truth out of each narrative. And again, your parents is probably the most powerful one because it's the closest to you.
Yeah, and I would say, even for us, relationships are always gonna be, we're gonna be learning different things. And even as a married couple, we go through marriage classes, we go listen to other couples, we go to seminars. It's something that as we get older, it's not like once you find that person and you're married, your relationship is good and you're set. And so I love the advice of talking to your parents. I would say even people who have broken relationships, ask them the story. What went wrong? What would you do over again? And it's just like us being able to say, hey, these are some of the things we did wrong. We would love for you guys to learn from them and to avoid that road. And I think we can find wisdom in asking other people as well. Like if you have a relationship that didn't work out, maybe unfortunately your parents or someone in your family has a broken relationship. I think we can learn from that as well.
Yep. So listen, again, hopefully you were able to take something from it. Again, we just really wanted the opportunity to share with you and wanted to take your question. So hopefully there was a question in here. You were like, hey, I had that question. My question was answered. But again, you have more time. This series is going to be long, so we're going to answer lots of questions. But I know we're really, really close to time. So what I want to do is pray and then dismiss you guys to lunch. So, Lord, we're thankful for this time. We're thankful because God, you're always working in our situation, no matter what it is. And so whether it's someone in this room or people watching online who are, just walking through this, especially for juniors and seniors who are a lot closer to this and a lot closer to leaving into their next stage of life, Lord, just guide them through it. God, help them to make wise decisions based off of, Lord, your word, and also to look for those things, even in the midst of their culture, that they wouldn't let the culture rush them, that they would be on their time and on your time, and with lots of conversation, whether they're friends or their parents, with those that they know and love and trust, that will help them get to a good place. So give us a good day, Lord. Give everyone who's on campus and here in this room a good lunch, and we pray these things in your name, amen. You guys are dismissed.